We now move from a world-leading regulator to the perspective of a world-leading technology company. And I'm really delighted that we have David Harvey with us today, who's a Senior Cloud Solution Architect for Data and AI from Microsoft. And he's going to be giving us a Microsoft perspective on all of these issues. So David, thanks very much.
Thank you very much. Let me just get myself a glass of water. It is Christmas party season after all, so. Okay, excellent. So yes, I'm Phil Harvey, a Senior Cloud Solution Architect for Data and Artificial Intelligence at Microsoft here in the UK. I work with our partners to help them use our cloud technologies. And today I want to share with you 3 particular things. And I just want to say at the start, what an extraordinary video to have to follow. So if I seem a little bit nervous, that will be why. So I want to talk to you about humanizing data. And this is a conversation which has evolved over the last year from the delivery of Microsoft's principles through to our work in the field talking to developers. So this perspective is from me, somebody who works with developers on a daily basis to use these technologies and looking for a way to feed in this conversation to the people writing the code. So this explosion of data chart is where it kind of all started for me. And I think most of these are marketing now and mostly made up. But the question of why that's important remains at the heart of why I want to do this work. For me, data gives us new ways of knowing and new things to know. It's a fundamental shift in the way that we as a species engage with the world. And I really mean that. I see it as this significant. We're talking printing press level here in the change in the way that people can know things. It's also the way that machines know things. I'm not going to discuss the nature of the word knowing here, even though it sounds like over lunch it would be a good place to do that. And this is really important. If you want to talk about the business side of digital transformation, I'm very pleased that we're now talking about analytics and intelligence as the heart of that digital transformation journey. But first of all, I want to talk about this story. So this is a photo of a river delta. This is before illegal small-scale mining has taken hold. And this is a photo of the delta after illegal small-scale mining has taken hold. This has an impact on the local ecology, an impact on the local society, because with illegal mining, there is also illegal jobs and poor working conditions. It also has a massive environmental impact. A Microsoft research engineer, who's called Olivia Close, I should have moved that up a bit, I apologize, used computer vision technologies to detect the emergence of these small-scale mines so they could be shut down more quickly than with boots on the ground. Because with boots on the ground, the mines don't want to be found, and because they're illegal, they're usually protected in illegal ways as well. So I'm going to talk through an example that's called Breaking Bad, how we're making the ethical principles practical for developers, and how I see the next wave skills emerging. So Satya, our CEO, says the goal is to democratize AI, to empower every person and every organization to achieve more. Now, here, I asked myself, what does that mean for me? Somebody, I was a developer for 15 years. How can I use these tools in the simplest way possible? I have access to Azure, which has pre-built models, powerful compute, and all of these things. I have these things called cognitive services. These are pre-built models that Microsoft makes available. You can see facial recognition in there, everything through to anomaly detection, available in all sorts of different ways. And I was thinking about, in the middle, this simple thing of text analysis. Now, this does amazing things, pulls out sentiment, named entities, does a huge amount of work there. And lots of people are looking at the data that they can use this on. How can they use this technology on data they don't yet have? I thought, actually, you know what? There is lots of data out there that we already have. How can we use these tools to know new things? Turns out the complete works of Shakespeare is now a 5 meg text file that you can download. I'm of the generation who was impressed when it came on a CD in PDF format, and I thought that was amazing. 5 meg of text, what can I do with that? So, quick check, hands up if you are comfortable and you know Romeo and Juliet. Yeah, generally, okay, not a huge number of hands up, maybe it's a bit early. But spoiler alerts if you don't know that. But this is Romeo and Juliet over time. So the x-axis here is act.scene, and the y-axis is aggregate sentiment of the character spoken lines for that act and scene. So you can see there at the start, you've got a fight in the town square, you have a love story playing out, the family's getting involved seriously in the middle, all the way through to, and I'm sorry for the way this sounds, but mutual suicide in a chapel at the end there. So new tool on old data. You can go down to the character level and see that Romeo is a fellow of more extreme sentiment than Juliet in this, that may surprise some people. You can also look at how Shakespeare turned stories with different characters. So you can see there that the wife's involvement in the story in Macbeth are 2 key turning points in that plot. The key thing here is you can use these new tools on data you already have. And that's really important. Shakespeare's not writing any more plays. You might see another news article out there about the authorship problem still being studied. In every organization, there is data that you can look at again. And that can be for bias, that can be for new insight. In either way, you can know new things using these tools. The core currency of any business going forward would be the ability to convert data into AI that drives competitive advantage. But the question we're here to talk about is, should you use everything you possibly could? When we're talking to developers like me get very excited about all the toys they can play with, 5 meg text files and APIs, it's amazing. But then we come to this point of the practicality of these principles. Microsoft's principles here, you can find them in the book there, free ebook to download. We've heard a lot of those words already this morning. But what does it look like when you take it to a developer? This is no longer a business conversation I want you to think about. When you think about the teams writing code. Fairness. What makes AI unfair in the first place? Human bias, for example. That's all well and good, but what does that look like when you're writing code? It looks like this. It looks like a news headline about Durham using postcode to inform custodial decisions through machine learning. Developer may think, I get a great, really accurate model using postcode. But in the UK, your postcode contains a huge amount of implicit socio-demographic data about you. Hopefully in this room, many people know that just automatically. It is not the case with developers who are chasing the better model. There are many examples like this. Safety and reliability. Computers are amazing, they never get it wrong. This is something that leads into what's known as automation bias. Automation bias is the kind of thing that causes you to drive into the ocean believing you're sat-nav. Automation bias is the thing that makes somebody drink before getting in an autonomous vehicle and driving into a giraffe, because giraffes don't appear, but there's a safari park nearby and the giraffe escaped. That makes the news. Automation bias is something all developers need to be incredibly conscious of. And this falls under safety and reliability. Context is key. Oh, if I stop talking, does the subtitles go away? So this bot was live. Somebody Brady came up and said, I got scammed. This bot falls foul of something called positivity bias. The bot says, great, at the end. Positivity bias is a problem. Getting people to only put out positive messages can be damaging to the way people feel served by this technology. Talked about facial recognition earlier. We've heard that mentioned a number of times. Now, this gives us both new concepts of personally identifiable information, which leads to headlines like this. facial recognition used to weed out stalkers from a crowd, but the rest of the crowd didn't know it was happening. Experiments, we heard about King's Cross, this also happens in retail scenarios. Are you getting the right kind of consent? I've also seen a story this morning about the fact that if you put up a sign that says danger facial recognition in use, and you put a camera behind it, you get a lot of free training images of people reading that sign who are nicely lined up to gather those images. We have a huge amount of content and a set of principles relating to this specifically that you can look up, but I think you need to take that a step further for developers. You might have seen examples like this where with a human, in the human mind, that is a random dot pattern. This is an adversarial attack against a neural network, which means that it sees a panda as a gibbon with greater confidence. This attack is possible now. It's possible to choose the way you apply makeup to avoid facial recognition. It's possible to print out a set of glasses to fool facial recognition. These attacks are all now possible. It's even possible to paint markings on a road to help self-driving cars guide themselves towards somewhere where they're less safe. It's also possible to grow what's known as an adversarial attack beard and not be counted as a person at various events. This is not a fashion statement. This protects me from facial recognition systems around the country. I love going to these events and everybody's talking about their latest system. You walk up and go, where am I? It's amazing. Inclusiveness is a key part. Inclusiveness for Microsoft is incredibly important. Statistics like this terrify me. Until 2011, the female body type was not mandatory in crash testing in vehicles, which led to it being 47% more likely for somebody with a female body type to be injured in a crash. Testing is incredibly important in software systems. Knowing how you test for different situations leans on your bias, what you're expecting to see. There are over 1 billion people with disabilities in the world, and this is not disability as a personal health condition. In technology, this is a mismatched human interaction. Making that real, you'll see examples like the Xbox Adaptive Controller. This was built by developers in a hack to help more people experience the world of gaming. This is developers who've understood these principles and looked at how they can use their skills to democratize and be inclusive in the technology that we provide. Transparency, there is an inverse relationship between transparency and accuracy in the algorithms which are popular today. The better your model, usually the harder it is to understand because it is data boiled down to more complex maths. I don't understand the maths behind a whole bunch of those algorithms, but I know how to use them. I can use them, and I can pick the one that gives me the best score. But in the case of Durham, you saw that feeding in postcodes to one of these algorithms builds in a kind of socio-demographic bias. Great example is a relatively famous example now on the balance between asthma and pneumonia. The model came out, and they could look at the rules because they'd used a less accurate but more transparent algorithm. And they found that it is judged that having asthma made you had a lower risk of pneumonia, which is not the case. The case is people with asthma, as soon as they show any kind of respiratory distress, get the highest possible level of care. So in the outcomes data, people with asthma have better outcomes than people without asthma when it comes to pneumonia. It is only because they used a less accurate but more transparent algorithm that this kind of understanding was possible. And at the heart here, this is one of the things that hits homes with developers more than anything else. When their algorithm messes up, the nearest human gets the blame. And in any business that hasn't really considered this, the developer who wrote it is often the nearest human. There are cases, I couldn't find the example, where there are legal cases where the programming in onboard computers of standard vehicles was found to be so bad that the developers were culpable for the braking system failing. I need to find that example. It was, obviously can't say the brand, but it is, these examples are starting to happen now. We've learned many lessons at Microsoft. So you may remember in 2014, we released something called Tay onto Twitter. This was a bot that learned from its interactions. Negative actors on the internet got hold of this, and there weren't the correct controls in place, and radicalized our Twitter bot in a very short space of time. These lessons are being learned all the time. Developers can learn these lessons very quickly when they're presented with the right kind of examples. So, let's get that up quickly. One of the key things I want to focus on here is data science before machine learning. The world I see at the moment is that people are trying to get to machine learning and artificial intelligence too quickly. They're not using the core skills of the data scientists to understand the data. And if you think about it, let's take quantum computing, for example. Let's say only 6% of the population can talk about quantum computing without being confusing. You could build a machine learning model and get to an 80% accuracy and consider that to be good. I can write an algorithm that returns true, which gives me 94% accuracy, because I thought about the problem in a different way. Because if there's only 6% of people who can talk about it, the error rate on saying true all the time is extremely good. Social impact and interdisciplinary research are two of the things I want to call out here. Digital sociology is a growing field and is something that's incredibly important. I have a Bachelor of Arts degree in artificial intelligence from an era when we didn't have the compute or the data to make many of the algorithms work. So we learned about psychology, philosophy, sociology, anthropology, these kinds of things. That needs to come back. The over-dependence on specialization is a problem. We talked about illegal small-scale mining. Great example, sorry, the clicker, there we go. Same technology used by the Ordnance Survey to keep mapping data up to date. It's a key part of the social planning process. You can use both machine learning in decision support for medical outcomes. In this case, they also built a Minecraft model of the hospital for children to explore in their own way before going in for treatment, which led to calmer children being treated, which leads to better medical outcomes. There are many different things you can do with technology to help the outcomes. It's not just more expensive machine learning. There are many stories, and last year, I wasn't going to play the video again, but a developer at Microsoft has built an application called Seeing AI that's available for free that describes the world around. This uses many of the same APIs of the type that I use to process Shakespeare. These are all available right now. It just takes developers to understand how they can use it and the kind of problems that need solving, rather than chasing down that extra bit of accuracy in machine learning. And this speaks to every developer being an AI developer and every company being an AI company. That focus on skills is necessary. We need to think about the next wave of skills. This three-circle Venn diagram of data science has become kind of a joke around the internet because it's always got a unicorn in the middle of that person who doesn't exist. But if you break it down, you can look at the computer science skills that are needed. This is something Microsoft's extremely keen to support. We've refreshed our certifications. And there are considerations of the use of AI and ethical implications built into the learning material around these certifications. You can look at maths and stat skills. You can look at things like triple bottom line and environmental and social impact in the work that you're doing. These are not commonly taught in machine learning, statistics, and mathematical courses, but they're from the same discipline. Data-driven storytelling is also incredibly important because you need to help people understand what's happening. And when it comes to business skills, there's one I want to call out really above all the others here. And it's something I work on personally, which is the idea of empathy. And I'm not talking of emotional empathy. I'm not talking of the sharing the feelings of others. I'm talking about cognitive empathy. Cognitive empathy is the ability to understand in a rational way the needs and feelings of other people. The key relationship between empathy and diversity is what you're looking to encourage here, because you end up with things like socio-technical blindness, where on both sides you may have developers complaining about marketing. You may have marketing saying the engineers did this, dehumanizing that group and not understanding the way that they've processed. There's a great paper being written about a legal case in the States where diversity quotas were used in a legal degree. They were sued because somebody didn't make it into the degree because of the diversity quotas, but the case was won by the university because of the case for empathy. The ability to understand people from many different backgrounds needs to be trained into leaders by their learning environment being diverse as possible. Law degrees produce leaders, not just lawyers. If they don't have the right kind of diverse environment, you end up with worse leaders who don't understand the full range of the human condition. Human skills are the most important skills in data. So whether you're looking to detect illegal small-scale mining, whether you're looking to work on data that you've had for ages that you've not looked at recently or develop your own principles, whether you're looking for direct training material or papers that help you explain how these skills like cognitive empathy matter, the key thing that we're looking to do is to make data empower everyone. Thank you very much. This is a sample of the way we talk to developers about these considerations. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Phil. I think we can just do a couple of minutes of Q&A. I have to say, talk about bias in technology. If you have to actually grow a beard to avoid facial recognition technology, it does seem to me that's slightly significant gender issue. But
I wasn't going with makeup. I went with a beard. Yeah.
But I thought your point there about kind of human skills being the most important skills in data, I think is a really powerful kind of point to take away from this session. Now, ironically, I talked earlier about having just enough internet, and I was supposed to have an iPad to take all your Slido questions, and for some reason the iPad doesn't have quite enough internet to work. So luckily we've got a human backup, which is the ability for people to kind of raise their hands and just ask a question. So I've got a question here and then a second question here. So let's take both questions, please.
Hi, Michael Hobbs from Reputable.ai. The biggest risk in all of this, really, lies around the APIs that the cloud providers have put in place for AI. What steps has Microsoft taken to de-risk its own APIs?
Okay, do you want to take that straight away, and then we'll bring the microphone down here for the. Go ahead.
Okay, so I've had quite a lot of interaction with our product groups who are developing these APIs, and the depth of research they do around how to produce managed balanced models is extreme. Now, in some cases, you can't produce a model that is fully inspectable and get the full accuracy that's required in the competitive landscape. But what you can do is document the people involved, the data that was used, and any processes and processing, including the algorithms that were used in that. So it is an inspectable process, even when it is not an inspectable model.
Question here.
Rob Hubbard from LAS, so a digital learning innovation company. So I think it's brilliant that you're talking to your developers about this and you're getting them to think in these terms. Is there a separate department or body or somebody else that goes in and then audits that this has been done, that these things have been considered, and that this is evident in the code and the outputs from the things that you're programming?
So from a development perspective, yes. From an externally facing perspective, there is something called the Ether Committee, who is a group within Microsoft who looks at sensitive deals in this way to make sure our principles are being followed both by our customers and by the internal teams working on that.
And so, Phil, I mean, that kind of takes me to the kind of one question I had from your presentation, which is that in all of this, how are these messages kind of received and understood by the developers and others who actually working and building on the technology. Are you finding that there is a big appetite for this information, or is the pushback, or what does it feel like? What does the discussion feel like, the conversation feel like?
I think it tracks really well the process that you described of this event. So from the understanding there are many different principles and ethical frameworks and those things around, that's what it felt like 12 months ago. Everybody was going, everybody's got their principle, what's special? To now, when this message about principled consideration, using examples to show people how, for example, postcode matters, people are now listening, both from the leaders, the technical and business leadership, who go, we don't want to get the wrong headlines, down to the developers who want to understand how they can protect themselves and their work and the businesses from falling into these traps, which the industry has traditionally. So over the last 12 months, just up to Monday, I was working with a very big partner, and it was a core part of the conversation, which was how can we help spread this message and make sure the principle's being followed.
So from principles to principle consideration, I think that's a great way to wrap up what's been a really excellent session. Phil, thank you so much, and please join me in thanking you.
Thank you.